You are tuned in to The Low Band Show, broadcasting from the storm drains under the big city, where a tunnel crew runs this booth on salvaged gear, pipes humming, steady water dripping, piping surface science and tech news on a low band signal through the drains. I'm your host, Max Hertz. Welcome in. Here's what we do. We take real science and tech news from the surface, summarize it, then go deeper to educate, entertain, and shed light on what's in store for our collective future. News from the net, clear signal, and a little tunnel. If you came for hype, you took a wrong turn at the storm drain. Welcome in. Glad to have you with us today. Wiz, good to have you in the booth.
Always good to be here, Max. I'm ready for it.
Today, we're looking at some massive shifts in labor, longevity, and how we handle our power. We'll start with the declining rate of people participating in the workforce, before looking at some positive news on U.S. life expectancy being on track for a record high. After that, we have to talk about a major power outage during a heat wave and why home battery installations are surging as electricity costs rise. And to round things out, we've got a study linking prolonged sitting to cancer risk. Let's get into it.
This jobs report is generating a lot of talk, but the real story isn't the headline unemployment number. CNBC reported on July 2nd, 2026, that the U.S. labor force participation rate has dropped sharply. It matters because it reveals a workforce that is quietly shrinking. Wiz, what's happening under the hood?
It means the official unemployment rate is hiding the real damage. When people stop looking for work, the system stops counting them. The job market looks stable on paper, but only because the stadium is emptying out.
The report states the U.S. unemployment rate fell to 4.2% in June, largely because 720,000 people left the labor force. That pushes participation to 61.5%, the lowest since 1976, excluding COVID. Mike Reed of RBC called it a massive exodus. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, what is RBC?
They are the Royal Bank of Canada, a major global financial group. As for that exodus of dropping out, it means people aren't just transitionally unemployed. They are giving up entirely, which makes the unemployment rate look artificially low because they aren't being counted anymore.
Let's look at the actual numbers of people working. The article points out, while the establishment survey, which counts jobs filled, showed growth for the month of 57,000, the survey of households, which counts the actual level of those working, tumbled by 507,000. Wiz, what does that disconnect tell us?
It means the headline growth is a mirage. The establishment survey tracks payroll positions, but the household survey tracks actual living, breathing people. We added some corporate roles, sure, but 500,000 real individuals lost or left their livelihoods. That is a massive disconnect.
There is also the question of who is leaving the labor market. The text says the biggest plunge came from what is defined as prime age workers, or those between the ages of 25 and 54. That rate fell 0.6 percentage point to 83.3%. Wiz, how serious is that?
It's the most critical segment of the workforce. You can't blame this drop on retiring baby boomers or a lack of immigration when prime age workers are leaving the field. When your core 25 to 54 demographic checks out, the economic engine is losing its cylinders.
Whether this sharp pullback in participation is a temporary blip or the start of a deeper structural shift remains to be seen. The long-term direction is still uncertain, but we'll be watching the data closely. We'll be right back after this. This is a milestone that deserves our attention. CNN reported on July 2nd, 2026, that the U.S. age-adjusted death rate fell to a record low in 2025, likely pushing life expectancy to a record high. It's a massive post-pandemic shift. Wiz, how big is this drop?
It is a massive drop in historical terms, particularly when we compare it to the volatility of the last few years. The trajectory is finally moving in the right direction.
The report states, there were about 689 deaths for every 100,000 people in the U.S., the lowest rate recorded in more than a century of tracking. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, what exactly is the CDC, the agency behind this report?
They are the federal agency charged with protecting public health by tracking diseases and mortality trends. This data is their bread and butter, and a century of tracking gives us a very solid baseline.
The report lists the leading causes of death. Heart disease led with nearly 695,000 deaths, followed by cancer with nearly 623,000 deaths. Unintentional injuries, which includes drug overdoses, were the third leading cause of death.
So the major killers haven't changed, but the needle is moving on that third category. Unintentional injuries and overdoses have been driving the recent spikes, so any downward pressure there shifts the entire national curve.
The text explains, overdose deaths are still high. About 70,000 people died from an overdose in 2025, preliminary CDC data shows. But experts say that sharp declines probably played a large role.
A decline is great news, but 70,000 deaths is still an absolute tragedy. It is a step forward, but we are celebrating a slightly less devastating baseline. The progress is real, but the hill is still incredibly steep.
Whether this downward trend in mortality rates can be sustained over the long term remains to be seen. The future trajectory is still unknown, but we will continue to follow the data. We'll be right back. This one made me sit up. It's a stark look at our infrastructure's limits. ABC News reported on July 4th, 2026, that 842,000 homes lost power during a holiday heat wave. It matters because our basic utilities are buckling under seasonal pressure. Wiz, are we looking at a systemic failure?
It is definitely systemic. When a summer peak hits, we treat it like an unexpected black swan, but it's just physics meeting underfunded transmission lines. Our demand is scaling faster than our capacity, and the margin for error has basically vanished.
Here is what that looks like on the ground. Millions of Americans, however, will be contending with a heat wave that is blanketing much of the country, including in Philadelphia, where the Salute to Independence semi-quincentennial parade that had been set for Friday was canceled due to the dangerous heat wave.
Canceling a 250th birthday parade because it's too hot to stand outside is a pretty grim milestone. It shows we aren't just losing electricity, we're losing the ability to run public life during peak summer. It's adaptation by surrender.
The report notes that America's largest power grid operator, PJM, was under a federal alert to cut consumption due to generator outages, massive overloading on its transmission lines, and a surge in air conditioning use. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, what is PJM and why does it matter?
PJM is the regional transmission organization coordinating wholesale electricity across 13 eastern states and Washington, D.C. Think of them as air traffic control for power. When they issue a federal alert, it means the safety buffer between keeping the lights on and total collapse is down to a razor-thin margin.
The strain is showing up in the pricing as well. The report states spot wholesale electricity prices in Northern Virginia, home to the largest collection of data centers in the world, have surged beyond $2,000 per megawatt hour this week. That compares to about $40 when PJM is not in distress.
A 50-fold price spike is the market screaming that it's out of options. Northern Virginia's data centers are incredibly power hungry, and when they compete with millions of residential air conditioners on a sweltering afternoon, something has to give. Turns out, that something is your wallet or your power.
Whether these aging regional grids can be modernized quickly enough to handle the compounding demands of AI data centers and extreme weather remains to be seen. The long-term stability of the system is still uncertain. We'll be right back after this. The headline promises a buffer against rising rates. Let's see what the data actually says. Bloomberg News reported on July 1st, 2026, that home battery installations hit a record high. Wiz, is this a real sea change?
It's a rational response to grid math. When the utility rates climb, consumers find ways to bypass the premium hours. Storing your own electrons is no longer just a hobbyist play. It's basic retail arbitrage.
The report states, New home battery installations reached a record 673 megawatts of energy storage in the first quarter of 2026, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Wiz, for listeners who may not know, what is the Energy Information Administration?
Think of them as the official referee for energy math. They're an independent federal agency under the Department of Energy that tracks production, use, and pricing across the entire country, completely free of utility lobbying.
The report continues. California and Hawaii accounted for the majority of new residential battery storage, while Texas and Arizona also saw significantly higher numbers of installations. Wiz, how are these specific states driving the adoption?
By aligning the financial incentives with grid stress. California pays you better rates for sending power back after sunset, and Hawaii gives you a flat $400 per kilowatt installed. They are bribing homeowners to help save the grid from peak load spikes.
But there's a headwind. The article notes, however, the record-breaking home battery installations coincided with a slowdown in residential installations of solar panels, the result of the Trump administration and Republican-driven One Big Beautiful Bill having eliminated a 30% federal solar tax credit for homeowners. Wiz, how do you read that?
It is a classic regulatory tug of war. You kill the incentive to generate the solar energy, but spike the price of buying grid power by over 7% in a single year. Homeowners are buying batteries to protect what they already have, even as new solar installations tank.
Whether home batteries could actually unlock a more flexible energy supply for the broader grid remains to be seen. The long-term impact on power operators is still unknown. We'll be right back. The headline promises a major wake-up call for desk workers. Let's see what the study actually found. The journal PLOS Medicine published research on July 2nd, 2026, linking prolonged sitting to cancer mortality. Wiz, let's look at how we spend our workdays. The text states, researchers who tracked more than 90,000 people over a decade found that sitting or lying down while awake for more than 30 minutes in one period each day was associated with an increased risk of cancer death.
A 12-year tracking study on 90,000 people is a massive data set. But let's be precise. This is an observational association, not a direct causal mechanism. It tells us sitting and cancer risk are shaking hands in the data, but it doesn't prove one is pulling the trigger.
The study relied on wearable devices worn by participants. Wiz, for listeners who might not be familiar with it, what exactly is the UK Biobank?
It's a colossal biomedical database and research resource in the UK that tracks genetic, lifestyle, and health data from 500,000 participants. In this case, researchers used actual physical motion data from wrist wearables, which is way more reliable than people trying to self-report how much they sat on a questionnaire.
Let's look at the risk numbers. The text notes, each additional hour of prolonged inactivity every day was associated with a 10% increase in risk of cancer death.
A 10% relative risk increase per hour of continuous sitting is statistically significant in a study of this size. But notice they're tracking continuous inactivity, meaning solid blocks of sitting with zero movement, which behaves very differently in the body than broken up sedentary time.
The study also looked at the impact of different levels of activity. The report states, replacing 30 minutes of inactivity each day with 30 minutes of moderate physical activity, such as walking at an average pace, was associated with an 8% lower risk. The risk was 22% lower when 5 minutes of inactivity was replaced with 5 minutes of vigorous physical activity each day.
This is the sweet spot of the paper. Replacing just 5 minutes of sitting with vigorous activity gives you a 22% drop in risk. That's a massive return on investment for basically running up a flight of stairs or doing a quick set of jumping jacks.
Here is the daily chore comparison. Substituting 1 hour of sedentary behavior each day with light physical activity, such as ironing or washing up, was associated with a 12% lower risk of cancer death.
It really takes the pressure off. You don't have to live in the gym. Doing the dishes or ironing actually counts toward lowering your risk. The main takeaway is simply to disrupt the static state of sitting.
But whether these daily activity swaps are actually what causes the lower risk remains to be seen. Since this was an observational study, the true causal link is still unknown. We'll be right back. That is our board for today. We have looked at some heavy numbers, from prime age workers leaving the labor force to regional grids buckling under extreme heat and data center demands. But there is a counterweight. We are seeing tentative record highs in life expectancy, partly driven by falling overdose numbers, alongside a wave of home battery installations as people adapt to rising energy costs. And on the personal front, we are reminded that even simple daily chores might chip away at the risks of a sedentary lifestyle. Still, we are waiting on solid proof of cause and effect. Whether these structural pivots are temporary blips or permanent transformations, we will keep tracing the data as it comes. We've got a fresh batch of build and tech stories lined up for the next session. Keep your skepticism calibrated, and we will pick up the thread in the next episode.
It's certainly a lot to consider. If we missed an angle or you have further questions on these topics, please drop us a comment. We read them down here in the tunnel. And if this signal helped you stay informed, a like or subscribe keeps the pipes humming. More surface news and deeper dives are coming through the grate soon. Until then, stay curious. We'll catch you next time on the Low Band Show.